I'm probably the most miserable transmigrator in history. The moment I opened my eyes, I was blasted to death by a bone dragon, and when I woke up, I had turned into a skeleton. Other people transmigrate and end up surrounded by beauties. I transmigrated and ended up with my bones falling apart. The system even told me I could only live for 1 year. To stay alive, I could only start making a living by sneaking attacks in the dragon's lair. While my coworker was asleep, I quietly raised a huge rock. I thought I could turn things around as long as I kept my head down, until that succubus with bat wings set her sights on me. This skeleton is of pretty good quality. Take it away for vivisection. I, dead. In a darkness so lonely it was terrifying, my hazy consciousness kept turning this question over and over. On my first day after transmigrating to another world, I was killed by the breath of a bone dragon. Who would believe it if I told them? I'm afraid I've got the title of most miserable transmigrator firmly on my head. No, I refuse to accept this ending. What happened to the promised magic and fantasy? It ended before I even got to enjoy anything? Ding! Consciousness beginning to awaken. In the darkness, a faint light appeared, and a line of text emerged like fireflies, immediately triggering a chain reaction as more points of light began dancing before my eyes. Ding! Your race has been transformed into low-tier skeleton, namely Shomon. Pound race low-tier, skeleton level LV1, /LV10 strength, 4 tenths constitution, 4 out of 10 spirit, 8 tenths evolution requirements. Race evolution can be achieved after strength, constitution, and spirit are all maxed out skills. Bone alteration LV1. Appraisal LV1 status enslaved. Bone deterioration experience 0 out of 100. Description: a weak, terrifying, and tattered skeleton. Cannon fodder enslaved by the evil bone dragon. Pound. Probably able to hold on for about 1 more year before collapsing into pieces. The darkness was illuminated. I opened my eyes and saw the bottom of a dim canyon. On the rocky ground, vicious-looking skeletons were wandering aimlessly, a scene straight out of hell. I subconsciously raised my hand, but what came into view was not a hand of flesh and blood, but a pair of withered, yellowed black bone arms. The bones were full of pits and dents, covered in cracks. In some places were even missing pieces of bone, as if they would shatter in the next second. I had turned into a skeleton. This fact shook my mind wildly for quite a while before I slowly calmed down. Alright then, becoming a skeleton is still better than dying completely. At least I'm still alive, and as long as I'm alive, there's hope. I started summarizing my current situation. This game panel that came with me when I transmigrated was still there, and this is probably my greatest reliance. I suspect the reason I was able to regain consciousness after becoming a skeleton is thanks to this panel. The surname Pound had been added after my name, which should be the mark left behind when that bone dragon transformed me. The status bar now had 2 debuffs, enslaved and bone deterioration, especially the latter, with no flesh and blood to nourish them. My bones would continue to deteriorate over time, and both my strength and constitution would decrease. But the panel also gave me a way out. When strength, constitution, and spirit all reached 10 points, it would trigger race evolution. So the current goal was very clear: level up, evolve, and grow stronger. To level up, I needed experience, and to get experience, I had to kill monsters. My gaze fell on the skeleton co-workers around me, and I quietly used appraisal on one of them. Name Pound's low-tier skeleton level LV3 skills hardbone LV1 status enslaved. Bone deterioration description: a low-tier skeleton enslaved by the evil bone dragon. Pound. Its bones are very hard, and it can probably hold on for about 2 more years before collapsing. Can't beat it. I have no chance in a head-on fight against LV3. But not being able to beat it head-on doesn't mean I can't out-scheme it. The skeletons here are all brainless fools. After all, they don't even have brains anymore. I quietly followed behind this skeleton. When its status bar showed fatigued, and then changed to sleep, and after confirming there were no other colleagues around, I picked up a large rock and crept over. My arms trembled slightly from lack of strength. I gritted my teeth, raised the rock high, and slammed it down hard at that sleeping head. Bang! The sound echoed through the empty cavern, cracks spread across the skeleton's skull, and its status changed from sleep to stunned. Without a word, I exerted myself again, my bones creaking as the second blow landed solidly. The skull shattered and caved in. Ding! Killed a low-tier skeleton. EXP plus 30. I warily looked up at my surroundings, especially in the direction where Pound the Bone Dragon was. I guessed the death of such a low-level skeleton wouldn't draw its attention, but a guess was still just a guess. After waiting a long time without any movement, my hanging heart finally slowly settled down. The pile of bones on the ground was in much better shape than my own tattered body. I crouched down, detached its right arm, and weighed it in my hand, then tore off my own yellowed, blackened right arm. There were no pain nerves, only a pulling sensation, and the arm came right off. I aligned the new arm with my shoulder joint and activated bone morphing, connecting the two with precision. Then I adjusted the size a little, and it fit perfectly. A small stream of energy surged from the connection point. Ding! Obtained skill, Hardbone LV1. Constitution +1, a white light flashed across my whole body. Much of the blackened discoloration faded, and some of the tiny cracks healed and recovered. I can actually acquire skills directly. The ghostly blue flames in my eye sockets suddenly flared up. Countless skeletons served under Pound the Bone Dragon, and quite a few of them possessed excellent skills. This wasn't some dragon cave at all. It was clearly a treasure vault of skills. As long as I lay low, stockpiled enough skills, and then found the right chance to break free from Pound's control, the day would come when the sea is vast for fish to leap and the sky is high for birds to fly. I raised my head. In the pitch-black cavern, the flames in my eye sockets burned fiercely. Over the next week, I officially became a traitor within Pound's skeleton legion, smashing the heads of 10 skeleton colleagues one after another. Such a small number was just a drop in the bucket for Pound's skeleton army and drew no attention at all. My status panel was completely refreshed as well. Name, Lixiomon Pound Race, Low-Tier Skeleton, Level, LV3/LV10, Strength, 5 out of 10, Constitution, 5 out of 10, Spirit, 8 out of 10, Free Attribute Points, 1 Skills, Bone Morphing LV1, Appraisal LV1, Hardbone LV1, Great Strength LV1, Swiftness LV1, Stealthy Steps LV1, Status Enslaved. Bone Deterioration, EXP, 6300ths, Description, a fragile, terrifying yet versatile skeleton, cannon fodder enslaved by the evil bone dragon Pound, probably able to last another 1.5 years before collapsing into pieces. The 4 skills come respectively from 4 replaced limbs. After repeated testing, I figured out the rules. Each limb is bound to 1 skill slot. Whichever bones I replace them with, I can borrow that owner's skill, and once removed, the skill disappears. If I want to make these skills completely my own, I'll probably only be able to do that after evolving. And the combination of Stealthy Steps LV1 and Swiftness LV1 is practically tailor-made for sneaking up and clubbing someone from behind. Now I often don't even have to wait for my colleagues to fall asleep. Hugging a stone pillar and striding over on my long legs is enough to solve the problem directly. But my good days couldn't last. That day, a group of guests arrived at the dragon cave. They had goat horns, long slender tails covered in scales, and black bat wings on their backs, succubi. The group of succubi flew in midair, sweeping their gaze over the skeleton crowd as if inspecting merchandise. I was all too familiar with that kind of look. 3 minutes earlier, I had been looking at my colleagues with the same eyes. I shrank my neck and hid among the pile of skeletons. But these fine bones of mine, meticulously maintained and smooth and white, among the withered, yellowed, ragged coworkers around me, simply stood out like a crane among chickens, every inch radiating that damned, nowhere-to-be-placed charm. A succubus picked me out. I had barely escaped Pound's clutches before falling into a succubus's claws. Name Lucia, Pound Race, High-Ranking Demon Class Mage. Elemental Mage Level LV34/LV40. Description: a high-ranking demon servant of the evil bone dragon Pound, synonymous with destruction and evil, skilled in elemental magic, possesses extensive magical knowledge and a commendable spirit of research, making her excellent research material. Lucia tapped my skull and said with satisfaction, I could only keep playing dumb. If they figured out I possessed intelligence, I could forget about escaping their clutches in this lifetime. I was taken to a plaza enclosed by stone walls, where quite a few skeletons were already wandering back and forth within the limited space. Several low-ranking succubi were in charge of guarding the place. I appraised them and found that their levels were generally above LV10. I blended into the plaza for 3 days, pretending to wander aimlessly while actually sneaking close to the succubi to eavesdrop for information. Gradually, I pieced together the truth. Lucia was trying to cultivate a special type of skeleton species, elemental skeletons. They were a rare variant capable of using elemental magic. And all of us skeletons being pinned up here were just consumable materials for recording experimental data. To be precise, in her estimation, these skeletons had no chance of successfully transforming at all, and were merely cannon fodder samples used to collect data. The first experiment would be 3 days later. During those 3 days, I was watched so closely that I had no chance at all to club my coworkers unconscious. But it wasn't as if I did nothing. While a few coworkers were asleep, I quietly knocked them out and swapped out my limbs. I replaced all my skills with defensive survival ones: hard bone, self-healing, toughness, fire resistance. The information I overheard showed that the first experiment had something to do with fire, so I specifically equipped fire resistance. 3 days later, the experiment began. Lucia reappeared at the testing ground. Without a single word of nonsense, directly ordering 2 succubi to seize a skeleton and drag it in front of her. She reached out and pressed a hand on the skeleton's head, magical power tracing a magic pattern in her palm. Molten fire. Flames poured down over its head like magma. That skeleton struggled madly, its bones colliding and scraping with a hair-raising sound, and before long it turned into a pile of pitch-black remains. It couldn't even endure the beginning, truly useless. Next, the second skeleton was dragged up, and the same magic was poured down on it. With one kick of its legs, it died cleanly and decisively. Next, one after another, more than 20 skeletons were scrapped under the molten fire, and only 3 barely made it through. But immediately afterward, Lucia stuffed some strange crystal into their chests, and the flames in their chest cavities and eye sockets instantly turned orange-red, then burned them into a pile of black chunks. By the time I came back to my senses, all the coworkers around me had already been taken away. On the empty plaza, I was the only one left standing there all by myself. Damn it, so conspicuous. I quietly turned sideways, pretending to wander unconsciously as I edged toward where there were more skeletons. The longer I could lie low, the better. Maybe watching a few more rounds of barbecue would let me live a little longer. However, the moment I took a step, 2 succubi grabbed my shoulder blades from the left and right. I couldn't move. Suppressing the instinct to struggle, I was carried in front of Lucia. At such close range, she truly was a peerless beauty, with a smoking hot figure, and her horns, tail, and bat wings added an extra touch of exotic charm. But I was in no mood to appreciate any of it right now. She gave me a once-over, her face devoid of any extra expression. In her eyes, I was probably no different from an insect. Her right hand pressed against my smooth skull as magic power traced out a magic circle. Fire slurry. Molten lava-like flames poured down along my skull, spreading over every inch of my bones, as if coating my skeleton in a layer of fire. Since becoming a skeleton, this was the first time I had felt pain. The ghostly blue flames in my chest cavity and eye sockets shook and quivered wildly, and my throat let out strange, involuntary sounds of bones grinding. Clack, clack, clack. My bones were burned black over and over, then healed over and over. Fire resistance greatly weakened the flame's damage, while self-healing worked desperately to repair me. When the fire slurry finally ended, my skeleton glowed faintly red and steamed, like a billet of iron just pulled from the forge. With such a weak aura, it actually endured the fire slurry. Lucia was somewhat surprised. The 2 succubi hoisted me up with hands of magic power. After all, touching me now would burn their hands. Lucia took out a crystal. I noticed this one was a size larger than the one she had used on those 3 unlucky bastards earlier. Special treatment? A reward for excellence. The crystal was precisely stuffed into the ghostly blue flame in my chest. The flame instantly flared up violently, dyeing the flames in my eye sockets orange-red as well. My whole body was like a pile of firewood set alight, burning frantically. It hurt. It hurt like hell. Compared to this, that fire slurry just now was basically a hot spring bath. Crack, crack, crack. The sound of splitting went on without end, as every bone in my body cracked from the burning. My skeleton turned red-hot, like porcelain overfired in a kiln, about to shatter into slag the very next second. Self-healing was desperately repairing it. But compared to the speed of collapse, it was just a drop in the bucket. The only reason I hadn't shattered yet was that tenacity, hard bones, and fire resistance were barely holding the line. So it still wasn't enough after all. Looking at me collapsed in the flames, Lucia revealed a disappointed expression. I understood in an instant. She had never intended for any skeleton to survive this. Based on our performance during the fire slurry stage, she inserted a lethal dose of crystal, with the goal of collecting death data. Enduring the pain, I opened the panel. Amid the scorching flames, those glowing words were still perfectly clear. Free attribute points. I still had 1 attribute point I'd been saving and hadn't used. Add it to Constitution. Ding! Constitution +1, a surge of heat seemed to well up from the very depths of my marrow. And the spreading cracks were finally halted. Immediately afterward, self-healing and the newly added Constitution point took effect at the same time, and the cracks began to slowly grow closed and heal. entering a tug-of-war against the destructive power of the flames. Shattering, healing, shattering, healing. My skeleton kept replaying this tug-of-war over and over, while I let out clattering wails in agony beyond endurance. Only when the flame's ferocity gradually weakened did I finally feel a sense of release, like crawling out of hell. Ding! Constitution +1 skill obtained. Fire Magic LV1. Unlocked optional class at LV10. Elemental Mage. Unlocked evolution path. Low-tier flame skeleton. The flames finally withdrew completely into my bones. The orange-red firelight faded little by little, turning ghostly blue once more. Lucia's expression shifted from delight to disappointment. So the transformation still failed? Still, it actually endured it. What a lucky guy. She kicked me, then turned to the remaining skeletons. Next one. Trembling, I slowly got back to my feet. I continued to pretend to be dull-witted, wandering aimlessly. Yet deep within the ghostly blue flames in my eye sockets, a trace of orange-red quietly flashed by. Fire magic was mine. I suppressed the urge to try out the legendary magic and continued playing the part of a brainless low-tier skeleton. Hide, lie low, wait for the right moment. I had one more trump card now. Of all the skeletons, I was the only one who survived the experiment in the end, but on the surface it still looked like a failed transformation. This did not exceed Lucia's expectations. She had never planned to succeed on the first try. Very soon, she began scouting new skeletons in the canyon for her experiments, and the square was filled with a new batch of unlucky wretches. After the first round of experiments, I confirmed one thing. Lucia never counted the number of skeletons. In her eyes, these instinct-driven test subjects were no different from pigs. No one would remember how many pigs they had caught. When Lucia went out again to gather materials, and only a few low-tier succubi were left guarding the square, I quietly crept up behind the target I had long since picked out. A LV5 skeleton. One hand clamped over its face. Flames. The ghostly blue flames were inconspicuous in the dim cave, instantly engulfing the skeleton's head and frenziedly scorching the inside of its skull. My other hand stabbed fiercely into its chest, grabbing the soul fire inside its ribcage and continuing to burn it. Ding! Killed a low-tier skeleton. EXP +50. I quickly looked around, and after confirming it was safe, neatly tore off its left leg. Then removed my own left leg with fire resistance. After removing it, fire resistance was still on the status panel, probably because after enduring the flames head-on, this skill had completely become my own. I aligned the new leg with my hip joint and activated bone transformation. Ding! Acquired skill, stealthy steps LV1. The faint sounds in the air vanished completely. Next, I broke the remaining corpse into bone fragments of various sizes, carefully wrapped them in flames, and burned them bit by bit into powder, scattering it evenly across the ground. After dealing with all the traces, a sense of mental exhaustion welled up. Is magic related to mental points? Li Xiaoman was glad that his mental points were fairly good, and then fell fast asleep. Li Xiaoman did not forget to glean information from the low-tier succubi during the day. Knowing what Lucia's next experiment was about was very important to Li Xiaoman. Last time, it was precisely because he had found out the experiment was related to fire, and thus gathered the corresponding skills, that Li Xiaoman had endured that demon's torment. Thanks to Li Xiaoman's active inquiries, he finally figured out the information about the next experiment. This time it wasn't fire, but earth. Tenacity, hard bones, self-healing could all be kept and used, but what he needed now was earth resistance. At last, he found a LV6 little cutie. It had earth resistance and great strength. Having two skills was quite rare among low-tier skeletons. There was no need to take it just yet. His stealthy steps still needed to be used for a few more nights so he could gather enough EXP to level up. Last time, surviving in the end had still depended on allocating his free attribute points in time. So it would be safer to level up once more before Lucia returned and obtain free attribute points. Last time his constitution was 5. This time his constitution was 7. So maybe he might not need to spend those free points after all. In any case, he had to guard against accidents and prepare for risks. At night, he skillfully crept up to the skeleton he had selected in advance, and flames shot into its eye sockets and chest, burning madly. Ding! Killed a low-tier skeleton, EXP +60. Then he dismantled it, burning it piece by piece, grinding the bones to dust and scattering the ashes. That bone dragon has been sleeping all this time lately, master. Li Xiaoman was so startled that he shuddered, scattering the last handful of ashes as he pretended to wander around nonchalantly. He even stuffed the last finger bone into the gap in the arm bone. Who's there? A delicate shout with a suppressed voice rang out. As expected, he had still been discovered. Very soon, at the corner up ahead, a succubus walked out, and at her feet crouched a slime-like black shadow. Just a low-tier skeleton? Seeing Li Xiumon's appearance, the succubus quietly breathed a sigh of relief. After all, who would worry about their conversation being overheard by a skeleton that acted only on instinct? Li Xiumon also realized that he seemed to have heard something quite serious. Master, it's getting late today. If there is any movement on Pound's side, I will notify you again. If there is no news, Master should proceed with the planned attack on Pound in 1 month. The succubus bent respectfully at the waist, as if saluting the slime-like shadow at her feet. Li Xiumon's spirits lifted. Attack Pound. There was actually such a good thing? Wasn't this exactly the opportunity he had been waiting for so desperately? When the time came, he could fish in troubled waters, and with all the strength he had built up over so long, a sudden eruption from him might well give him a chance to escape this mire. Meanwhile, the black slime beneath the succubus's feet wriggled for a while, then disappeared into the shadows. It did not say a single word from beginning to end. Perhaps the restrictions between them meant that the succubus could only relay messages one way and could not receive information. Even after that black sludge disappeared, the succubus still remained in place, maintaining her respectful posture without moving. Li Xiumon casually turned in another direction and wandered off into the distance. Then, just as the succubus was about to look over, he even put on a little act of tripping on flat ground, and after getting back up, changed direction again and continued wandering. He displayed the stupidly cute harmlessness of a low-tier skeleton to the fullest. Li Xiumon had been living among low-tier skeletons, acting as a low-tier skeleton day and night. He, at this moment, was a low-tier skeleton. The succubus also withdrew her gaze from Li Xiumon. She had originally wanted to get rid of Li Xiumon, since among so many skeletons, Lucia would not care if 1 or 2 were missing. But Li Xiumon was, after all, the only skeleton who had survived the first round of experiments, and no one knew how deep an impression he had left in Lucia's mind. So she did not make a move. After burning the final section of finger bone stuck in the arm bone to ashes, Li Xiumon began to rest. Lucia was expected to return the day after tomorrow. So tomorrow night, he had to make a move on that colleague who possessed Earth resistance, while also raising his level to LV4. The next night, already familiar with the process, he first took care of a skeleton and burned it to ashes. Then, without resting, he crept up to the skeleton that possessed Earth resistance. Another round of burning. Ding! Level increased to LV4. Free attribute point +1. After feeling the soul fire surge more briskly after leveling up, his mental fatigue also recovered slightly. He removed its left leg and attached it to his own left leg. It failed, and he ended up snatching strength, one of that skeleton's 2 skills. Damn it, I hate guys with multiple skills. Li Xiumon tore off the right leg again, tore off his own right leg, and attached it. Ding! Acquired skill Earth Resistance LV1, but the skill Tenacity carried on his right leg was gone. Just in case, he now had to find someone with Tenacity, remove their left leg, and attach it to himself. He destroyed the remains in front of him, and an intense wave of fatigue washed over him. Forcing himself to stay alert, he searched through the pile of skeletons. Each use of appraisal made his mind a little more tired. He finally found one. When he found the guy with the Tenacity skill, Li Xiumon even let out a low croak. Sneaking over quietly, he pinned down its head. Burn. Ding. Killed a low-tier skeleton, EXP +50. His spirit was almost completely drained. After replacing the leg bone, he no longer had the energy to deal with the remains. He could only scorch the skeleton once with a low flame, making it look like it had died from bone deterioration. Ding. Spirit +1. Finding a corner, he collapsed to the ground. Before passing out, he vaguely heard a notification sound. When he woke up, everything around him was as usual. That skeleton's remains had already disappeared, probably treated as bone deterioration and disposed of by the succubi. Lucia still hadn't returned, so it seemed it was still early. Li Xiumon looked at his status panel. His spirit had already risen to 9 points. At this moment, hard bone, tenacity, self-healing, and earth resistance were all there. His constitution was as high as 7 points, and he still had 1 free attribute point. Li Xiumon was so confident he even wanted to shout, "Who can kill me?" He was even starting to look forward to Sister Lucia coming over to torment him soon. Then he could get some earth magic for himself, and when he made it big in the future and came back for revenge, he would definitely give lovely Sister Lucia a quick end. Sure enough, by noon, a bit of sunlight filtered into the depths of the canyon. Sister Lucia fluttered her beautiful bat wings and descended to the bottom of the valley. Her beautiful, deep purple eyes swept over the skeletons, about to bestow upon him the earth magic he had long been looking forward to. She waved her delicate hand, and two cute succubus girls held up a skeleton. Ah, that skeleton was me. Looks like Sister Lucia still remembered me. The moment she arrived, she had me seized and brought up. Looking at the skeleton before her, Lucia actually saw anticipation in the soul flame within his eye sockets. She shook her head. It was probably just her imagination. I hope you can pull through this time too. Lucia spoke. Then, the wind of Aeolus. The fierce wind swallowed Li Xiaomon like a vortex. Every inch of bone felt as if countless knives were slicing at it. That damn demon woman. Why is it wind? Li Xiaomon viciously cursed Lucia and all the succubi present. He only felt as though even his soul was about to be blown out of his skeleton. The earth resistance he had prepared now seemed like a complete joke. He vaguely remembered the succubi whispering in his ear. But none of that mattered now. Right now, he had to find a way to endure this wind of Aeolus. He suppressed the unease in his heart and controlled his bones to become flatter. Tenacity and hard bone continuously strengthened his bones, and his arms shielded his chest cavity to prevent the soul fire inside from being blown out. Self-healing continuously repaired the tiny weathered nicks on the surface of his bones. The soul fire within his body kept compressing, making the flame incomparably solid so it would not be blown out by the wind. But even so, the surface of his bones looked as if it had been gnawed by countless ants, full of pits and dents. Around him, white bone powder mixed into the wind and continually battered his body. Li Xiaomon came to understand the importance of resistance skills. If it hadn't been for fire resistance last time, he probably could never have endured the burning of fire slurry. This time, I really got screwed over badly. The wind stopped. Only a tattered skeleton frame remained standing where he was, and the tiny blue flame burning in his chest cavity looked as if it would go out the next second. Lucia even thought for a moment that this skeleton was already dead. But the next second, the ghostly blue flame in its chest cavity flickered, then blazed up again. The hollow eye sockets also seemed to be ignited, flames burning within them once more. It had come back to life. Li Xiaomon swayed a little and barely managed to remain standing. But Lucia clearly had no intention of letting him off. She waved her hand, and two succubi stepped forward to support Li Xiaomon's tottering body. Then she walked up to him. A crystal, different from the last one, appeared in her palm, pale blue in color. It was a size smaller than the last one. This confirmed Li Xiaomon's guess. Based on the skeleton's performance in the first round, Lucia chose the size of the crystal for the second round. This amount was just enough to kill a skeleton. If he was right, she was testing how skeletons reacted when killed by crystals of various attributes. Let's try this one. Without the slightest hesitation, she stuffed the crystal into the flame burning in Li Xiaomon's chest. The moment the crystal touched the flame, the fire reacted as if it had met an accelerant and began burning violently. The flame changed from ghostly blue to pale blue, covering his body like a pale blue gale. Like a hurricane tornado, it scoured his body. In just a few breaths, all the bones in Li Xiaomon's body had thinned by a whole circle. White bone powder drifted up. This was probably karmic retribution for grinding a colleague's bones to dust and scattering the ashes a few nights ago. Li Xiaomon thought to himself with bitter amusement. Very soon, his teeth began falling off the bone one by one, and his skull was scoured until only a thin layer remained, which in the next moment was blasted full of holes of all sizes. Within those holes, the ghostly blue flames swayed constantly, yet stubbornly refused to go out. His ribs were also snapped one by the wind and fell away from his body. The bones in his arms and legs were blown down until they were only as thick as a little finger, and the finger bones fell off one by one. His whole body was already on the verge of collapsing into pieces. But Li Xiaomon's consciousness remained clear the entire time. Only when his body reached the critical point of collapse did Li Xiaomon open the panel and add his free attribute points to Constitution. The self-healing from his natural recovery and the boost from the Constitution increase sounded the horn of counterattack at the same time. His bones seemed to glow as they continuously healed the shattered skeleton. Meanwhile, Lucia widened her eyes and stared closely at Li Xiaomon's self-healing frame. Just like last time. Is this skeleton's special talent some kind of extraordinary self-healing ability? Lucia stroked her smooth chin and muttered. Then she shifted her gaze away. Having already determined that the remaining power wouldn't be enough to destroy the skeleton, so she stopped paying attention. This skeleton's self-healing ability was strong, but to her it still wasn't worth much notice. Next, Li Xiaomon had finally endured the wind and collapsed onto the ground, looking at the panel floating before him. Ding! Constitution +1 obtained skill. Wind resistance LV1. After waiting a long time, he still didn't see the wind magic LV1 he had been longing for. Damn it! Wind magic. Where was his huge wind magic? Although Li Xiaomon was dissatisfied, he had roughly guessed the reason. It was probably because the wind crystal Lucia had stuffed in this time was too small. But if she had used a bigger one, he would probably be dead by now. Damn it, I got screwed over badly. If he had wind resistance, this time he definitely wouldn't have been in such a sorry state. Li Xiaomon climbed up from the ground and wandered around with a vacant expression, pretending to know nothing. Elemental attributes are divided into 4 types: fire, water, earth, and wind. So far, Lucia has already tested fire and wind. The next experiments should be earth and water. Just in case, should he collect both earth resistance and water resistance to prevent things from going wrong? By the time the experiment ended, Li Xiaomon was once again the only handsome guy left in the whole place. After all, they had worked together for a while. Li Xiaomon silently mourned these lovely colleagues. They were all qualified skill libraries. It was an honor for Li Xiaomon to know them. The gazes of the succubi swept over Li Xiaomon one by one, probably marveling at how damn tough this guy's life was, managing to survive while 2 rounds of skeletons had already been sent off. It couldn't be helped. His fate was just that tough. The 3rd batch of skeletons was quickly brought in. Li Xiaomon was more skilled this time. He skillfully found a skeleton with sneak and replaced toughness with sneak. Then, under cover of night, he quietly knocked off his cute colleagues. 2 a night, sometimes 3. The more he did it, the smoother it became. The succubi scattering ashes had gotten to the point where they hardly flew anymore. Apparently because they had sensed the particulate pollution in the air. Li Xiaomon's level had also risen to LV5, and he was close to LV6. But tonight, he did not plan to make a move. Because he had been too rampant lately, during the day while hanging around the succubi, he even heard them say that there seemed to be fewer skeletons than last time, and the square felt rather empty. The succubi did not suspect in the slightest that one skeleton could be attacking other skeletons. Faced with the succubi's trust, Li Xiaomon felt a little proud. To think he could make the enemy trust him so much. The next day, Lucia returned again. Li Xiaomon's skills had already been switched to earth resistance, water resistance, toughness, self-healing. After all, he no longer really trusted the succubi's information. Lucia once again had the succubi drag Li Xiaomon out from the pile of skeletons. Damn it, this demon really couldn't wait to kill him. He had clearly wanted his colleagues to step into the pit first. This time it was the water attribute. Hold on through it. Water prison. Lucia looked at the skeleton in front of her and said with a smile. Although her tone was very gentle, she did not hesitate in the slightest to use a skill that could kill him on him. Streams of water condensed out of thin air one after another, wrapping around Li Xiaomon and forming a spherical water prison floating in the air. The water pressure kept increasing, and the current kept scouring his body. Under the water pressure, his bones bent one after another. However, with the bonus from toughness, Li Xiaomon still managed to endure the water prison with relative ease. The leeway of 9 points in Constitution. Lucia revealed an excited expression, then took out a dark blue crystal 1 size larger than the previous fire attribute crystal and stuffed it into the flame in the skeleton's chest cavity. It was another bout of agony worse than death, but he endured it by adding points to Constitution. Ding! Constitution +1. Obtained skill, Water Magic LV1. Unlocked new evolution path. Low-tier ocean skeleton. Low-tier ocean skeleton. A skeleton of the ocean, possessing the ability to manipulate water currents. It's great to be alive. Seeing Li Xiaomon lying on the ground without the slightest change, Lucia's expression shifted from anticipation back to disappointment. She even added a kick and shouted, "Next one." Li Xiaomon climbed back up from the ground again, wandering around nearby. In reality, though, he was gloating as he watched the various ways his new batch of colleagues come skill libraries died. It had to be said, once he was out of danger, watching how other skeletons died was actually quite an entertaining activity. Damn it. He had already turned into a pervert. Back when he had just been transformed into a skeleton and dragged into the skeleton nest, he had been too scared to even go outside after seeing the other skeletons. He never expected that he would now turn into this ghastly state. Could this be what they call corruption? After sending off another new batch of co-workers, the way those succubi looked at him had already become strange. In the days that followed, Li Xiaomon no longer needed to rub against the succubi. Instead, the succubi fought to be the first to rub against him. As they rubbed against him, they said things like, "Lucky skeleton, bless me to get promoted to a mid-tier succubus. Lucky skeleton, bless me so that next time I go out I can drain a Shota. Lucky skeleton, bless me to escape bad luck and enter good fortune, 10 pulls and 2 golds." Alright, the last one was what Li Xiaomon hoped for. Damn it, feudal superstition really can't be trusted. These succubi seriously hindered Li Xiaomon from farming co-workers, and he kept waiting until Lucia returned. Before he barely managed to grind up to LV6 and obtain the free attribute point that could save his life. And Li Xiaomon's constitution had already reached 11 points, meeting the evolution requirement, but strength was only 5 points. His stats were severely lopsided. This time, without a doubt, it was an Earth attribute experiment. The skills Li Xiaomon had prepared were Earth resistance, tenacity, hard bones, self-healing. Lucia once again picked Li Xiaomon out from the pile of skeletons and cast magic. Degradation. This time, it was the skill that most restrained skeletons, using mud to degrade and disintegrate bones. For skeleton-type creatures that constantly carried the bone degradation status, it was a highly suppressive skill. But with 11 points in constitution and possessing earth resistance, Li Xiaomon calmly endured the degradation. This time, the earth attribute crystal was already the size of a pigeon egg. In an instant, Li Xiaomon was wrapped in earthen yellow flames, and his bones layer by layer turned to mud and crumbled apart. At this moment, Li Xiaomon felt as if he had returned to the earth itself, becoming a corpse sleeping within the land. His body kept decaying, merging into the earth. It was not only the collapse of his body, but also the collapse of his consciousness. That was really dangerous. Li Xiaomon sighed inwardly. If it had been before, encountering the earth attribute that countered skeletons would probably have been dangerous. But for the current Li Xiaomon, this kind of attribute crystal could no longer threaten him. He could even endure it without adding points to constitution. Right now, he was a tank-type skeleton. Ding. Constitution +1. Obtained skill, Earth Magic LV1. Unlocked new evolution path. Low-tier Earth skeleton. Low-tier Earth skeleton. A skeleton born from the earth. With bones as hard as rock and the power to manipulate soil and stone. Level cap LV25. Shaking the dirt off his body, Li Xiaomon ignored Lucia's disappointed gaze and continued wandering. What a wonderful demon, coming right up and handing him a full set of elemental skills. She could truly be called the angel investor of his prison break path. In the future, he would definitely let her die a little more easily. Although the result was good, this demon really had indeed been trying to kill him the whole time. Then, this fourth batch of co-workers also died one after another. Now there was only one super skeleton left who had survived 4 rounds of experiments, Li Xiaomon. Then, Li Xiaomon was let out. To be honest, Li Xiaomon was even a little reluctant to leave. Of the 4 elemental magics, he still hadn't obtained wind magic, and he had actually been looking forward to it a little. Before leaving, a group of succubi even plucked off the finger bones of his hand. It was said each succubus got one. The finger bone of a lucky skeleton came with a luck bonus. Under the supervision of Principal Lucia Pound, Li Xiaomon returned from the Succubus Academy, full of confidence. Now, he was confident he could carry out a dimensionality reduction strike against these foolish peers of his. He swiftly replaced himself with a full set of divine gear. Agility, LV1, right leg. Tiptoe, LV1, left leg. Swordsmanship, LV1, right arm. Great strength, LV1, left arm. Especially the right arm that possessed swordsmanship. That was an ultra-rare item. Among Pound's many low-tier skeletons, Li Xiaomon only encountered one. After obtaining this swordsmanship skill, he even gained a new evolution path and class. Low-tier skeleton swordsman, a skeleton that wields a sword and can use sword techniques. It is a rather dangerous skeleton. Level cap LV20, swordsman warrior class. Able to learn powerful sword techniques, he could now swagger through the ranks of low-tier skeletons. Patience, strength, timing. Li Xiaomon had not forgotten these 3 points. The timing had already appeared. If nothing unexpected happened, in less than 20 days, a group would come to subjugate Pound. And he needed, within these less than 20 days, to lie low carefully, raise his level, and gain strength. Then seize the opportunity. A week of hunting had raised Li Xiaomon's level to LV7. After all, this was Pound's territory, and now there were also intelligent succubi wandering around. He did not dare kill too many skeletons at once, so he could only keep to 2 or 3 a day and take it slowly. What he had targeted today was a max-level low-tier skeleton at LV10. After all, The level cap for low-tier skeletons was only LV10. Above that were mid-tier skeletons. Li Xiaomon had already hunted quite a few LV10 skeletons by now. His bones changed into claws. He seized the neck. Earth magic rapidly deteriorated the cervical vertebrae and then snapped them. Water magic was poured directly into the skull, extinguishing the soul fire. Fire magic reduced the bones to ashes. The whole sequence flowed like water and could be called art. If there were judges here, they would definitely raise a scorecard with a 10 without hesitation. Ding! Killed a low-tier skeleton. EXP plus 100, one step closer to LV8. Li Xiaomon activated, tiptoe, and carefully searched for the next skeleton. He was lucky today. It didn't take long to find the first lone skeleton. Maybe tonight he could set a new hunting record. He carefully wandered to places where there were fewer skeletons. Very soon, Li Xiaomon found another lone skeleton. Extremely lucky. Li Xiaomon crept over and did not even wait for this skeleton to fall asleep. He now had the confidence to force kill without attracting anyone's attention. Tiptoe brought him carefully closer. The bones at several fingertips of his right hand slowly grew, turning into sharp claws. Great strength erupted, slamming hard into the back of the skeleton's head. He could see the soul fire in its eye sockets tremble, and the status bar also gained a stiffened state. Before the skeleton could fall, Li Xiaomon swiftly closed in, and his bone claws viciously dug into the skeleton's two eye sockets. Burn! The ghostly blue flames burned wildly in the pitch-black night, invading the skeleton's eye sockets and devouring that cluster of soul fire. Ding! Killed a low-tier skeleton, EXP plus 90. From start to finish, there was hardly any noise at all. Li Xiaomon carefully lowered the skeleton and was about to use earth magic to sink it underground. But the next moment, a petite figure descended from the sky. Pitch-black bat wings, goat horns, and a long slender tail covered in fine scales. It was a succubus. Name, Tris Lucia Pound Hyut. Race, low-tier demon. Level, LV14/LV20. Class, dark mage. Description, an assassin, mage hidden in darkness. A low-tier demon capable of wielding the power of shadow and darkness. You would not want to be targeted by him, or else not a single night of sleep would be peaceful for you. The succubus spoke. Li Xiaomon charged without hesitation. One of his ribs writhed and grew, turning into a sharp-boned sword. Then, with his right hand, he snapped off a rib and thrust it at the succubus. You actually have intelligence. Tris felt a chill run down her spine. She recognized this skeleton. It was the one from that night, the skeleton that had seen her contacting her master. He actually possesses intelligence. He heard the message I sent to my master that night. He saw me attack the other skeletons tonight. This succubus, this skeleton, must die? In that instant, the skeleton and the succubus were completely united in purpose. Shadow Spike. Tris raised a hand, and sharp black spikes burst up from the ground, stabbing toward Li Xiaomon. Li Xiaomon's legs moved like afterimages as he nimbly dodged the black spike's attacks. Oomph! Shadow Bind. Tris let out a cold laugh, and then those hard, razor-sharp black spikes softened, like ropes, winding toward Li Xiaomon. Burn! Li Xiaomon swung his sword, and flames instantly covered the entire bone sword. Because it was a bone sword formed from his own rib, his magic power flowed through the entire blade without obstruction. The bone sword blazed fiercely, and amid crackling explosions, it unleashed a dazzling strike. One black rope after another was severed. Fire magic. How is that possible? Aren't you a low-tier skeleton? Tris was struck pale with shock. Before a lurking skeleton bares its fangs, no one knows how ferocious it truly is. Li Xiaomon viciously thrust at Tris's heart. Caught off guard by the attack, Tris cast aside her contempt and beat her wings to fly into the sky. So what if he can use fire magic? As long as she stayed in the air, she would stand undefeated. She was going to show her true skill and swiftly deal with this bizarre skeleton. But how could Li Xiaomon possibly give her the chance to take flight? The bone sword in his hand writhed and grew again, transforming into a sharp, slender spear. Then, gripping the spear with his left arm, giant strength activated. The flames in his eye sockets suddenly flared, and he hurled the spear with all his might. The spear, covered in ghostly blue flames, traced an inconspicuous blue line through the air and suddenly pierced Tris's pair of bat wings. Before the succubus could even react, she crashed toward the ground. Marshification. Li Xiaomon reacted swiftly, slapping both hands down onto the ground as earth magic and water magic activated at the same time. In an instant, the ground where Tris was falling turned into a swamp, swallowing Tris without making much noise. Only now did Tris finally realize the danger. Not caring about the consequences, She opened her mouth, wanting to call out to the other succubi and draw attention. But she had only just opened her mouth when that thick mud mixed with soil and water poured straight into it. Ugh ugh ugh. No cry came out. Li Xiaomon stepped forward and grabbed the succubus by the throat. The sharp claws formed from the finger bones at the tips neatly slid across her throat. Blood gushed out, and Li Xiaomon felt no discomfort at all. Only when the succubus's body stopped struggling and lost its warmth did Li Xiaomon let go. Looking at the succubus's graceful body soaked in the swamp, Li Xiaomon, feeling neither fear nor discomfort, could not help but think. Perhaps at the moment Pound transformed him into a skeleton, he had already forever lost some part of what made him human. But very quickly, Li Xiaomon's slight melancholy was dispelled by the cute bouncing numbers on the panel. Ding! Killed a low-rank succubus. EXP plus 1,400. Ding! EXP is full. Level increased to LV8. Ding! EXP is full. Level increased to LV9. Free attribute points plus 2. After grinding the succubus's body to dust, Li Xiaomon used earth magic to restore the swampy ground to its original state. Next, he cleaned up the scene a bit. After all, succubi are intelligent species, and the disappearance of one succubus might not be as easy to deal with as the disappearance of one skeleton. Next, he retrieved his ribbone spear, scorched it with flames once to remove the bloodstains on it. Then he turned the ribbone spear back into the form of a rib bone, aligned it with the break, and reattached it. You can't just throw bones around, or you'll get calcium deficiency. Then Li Xiaomon left the scene and turned back into that dull low-rank skeleton just muddling along and waiting to die. He also summed up the shortcomings of tonight's operation. After mastering magic, he had become too confident and careless, which was why the succubus noticed him. You should know that in the past, he would always follow carefully, keep watch, and only strike cautiously after the target had fallen asleep. After gaining the ability to deal with targets easily, he had grown numb and careless. He had to change this, otherwise it would happen again sooner or later. As Li Xiaomon wandered aimlessly, he reflected on this shortcoming of his. Triss's disappearance seemed not to have caused much of a stir. Perhaps a low-rank demon was not as important or noticeable to Pound and Lucia as he had imagined. And Li Xiaomon still lay low cautiously, not going out to hunt other skeletons again for several days in a row. Only after a week had passed, confirming Triss's disappearance really had not attracted any attention, did he continue hunting again. In fact, Li Xiaomon had wanted to lie low for a while longer. But time waits for no one. If the agreement between Triss and her master was still in effect, then in just a few days, her master's subjugation team would come attacking. That was the opportunity he had been waiting for all along. And once missed, there was no knowing when such an opportunity would come again. So, in order to seize this fleeting chance, taking necessary risks was also important. But when taking risks, he had to be even more cautious. Li Xiaomon carefully selected skeletons and hunted skeletons. Maintaining a kill count of 2 or 3 skeletons a day, Li Xiaomon finally, on the 3rd day, advanced to LV10. Name, Li Xiaomon, Pound Race, Low-Rank Skeleton, Level, LV10/LV10. The level cap for a low-rank skeleton is LV10. Class, None. Strength, 10 out of 10. Constitution, 13 out of 10. Spirit, 10 out of 10. Free attribute points 0. Evolution requirements. Race evolution can be achieved after Strength, Constitution, and Spirit are maxed out. Evolution paths. Low-rank Earth Skeleton, Skeleton Swordsman, Low-rank Ocean Skeleton. Skills, Bone Alteration LV1, Appraisal LV1, Great Strength LV1, Swiftness LV1, Stealthy Steps LV1, Swordsmanship LV1, Elemental Resistance LV1, Fire Magic LV1, Water Magic LV1, Earth Magic LV1. Status, Enslaved, Bone Deterioration, EXP, 1120/1000. Level up after evolution and choosing a class. Description, a low-rank skeleton that has mastered magic, possesses low-rank elemental resistance, and has grasped basic swordsmanship. Underestimating him will come at a price. He can probably last another 8 years before collapsing into pieces. Li Xiaomon did not possess any LV2 skills. According to his observations, only mid-rank skeletons and succubi above LV10 possessed LV2 skills. LV2 skills were on the same level as first-tier magic, something that classless low-rank skeletons below LV10 could not master. Li Xiaomon was not in a hurry to evolve and choose a class. Who knows what changes would happen to his appearance after evolving? By then, even an idiot would know something was up with him. He evolved out of nowhere. Who would believe that? Even if they accepted that he evolved in broad daylight, If they suddenly started taking him seriously and tightened their enslavement and surveillance of him, then he really would have no chance to break free for the rest of his life. He had no desire to work unpaid for the bone dragon forever. Early the next morning, the entire canyon shook, and countless rocks tumbled down from the mouth of the canyon. In an instant, skeleton after skeleton failed to dodge in time and was smashed to pieces. The ghostly blue flames in Li Xiumon's eyes suddenly flared up, and he raised his head, staring fixedly toward the rear of the valley. As if answering his anticipation, in the next moment, one orange-red fireball after another shot in from the mouth of the canyon. The opportunity he had been waiting for had finally come. Darkness deeper than the abyss. Brewing a forbidden magical draft with the fruit of darkness, offering it to the exalted Lord of the Abyss, the King of Darkness. Tier 7 Magic, Dark Sacrifice. Circles of pitch-black magic arrays rose from the ground, surging from the bottom of the canyon toward its mouth, blotting out the sky and covering the earth. And at the center of the magic arrays, in the deepest darkness of the canyon, the bone dragon named Pound stretched out his neck, chanting its Tier 7 magic. A pitch-black beam spewed from its mouth. Under the black beam, the canyon walls were instantly annihilated into nothingness. A captivating yet foul wine-like odor spread throughout the canyon. The Holy Lord sends down a saving angel. That sacred light will eventually shine upon every inch of the earth, praising the Lord's mercy. Tier 7 Magic, Judgment of the Holy Angel. Along with the chanting, a golden beam shone down from high in the sky. Like a golden curtain hanging from heaven, it was filled with sacred radiance. One could vaguely seem to see the phantom of an angel. And before that angelic phantom, a preacher dressed in splendid robes was raising his golden scepter and chanting. Despicable human who believes in the goddess of light, do you wish to bear the wrath of Pound the Bone Dragon? Pound beat its enormous bony wings. The airflow instantly sent countless skeletons near it flying. But it paid no attention, beating its wings as it charged toward the preacher's figure. Although Li Xiumon also couldn't understand how Pound's bony, draft-leaking wings could lift that body into the air. But in a world of magic, trying to talk about scientific reasonability was itself unreasonable. Pound charged at the preacher's body, only to be intercepted in midair. A purple figure clad in heavy armor blocked Pound. That slender, tiny body, insignificant before the dragon, firmly wielded a great sword and stopped the enraged, overbearing Pound. A high-level warrior-class professional. Li Xiumon felt that a low-tier skeleton of his level had better not concern itself with the immortals fighting above his head. Right now, what he needed was to seize the chance to escape Pound's clutches. If Pound were killed here by that preacher and warrior working together, that would be even better. As the bone dragon Pound was held back by those two immortals, the other adventurers and soldiers impatiently charged down into the canyon. Those long-range mage classes, meanwhile, stood at the edge of the canyon, chanting spells and casting magic toward the bottom of the canyon. The skeletons on this side also swarmed toward those humans, no longer showing their usual dull-wittedness. Even Li Xiumon felt a surge in his heart, an urge to kill the invaders before him at all costs. He immediately realized it was Pound's influence. If it were his former self, he probably wouldn't have been able to keep his reason at all, and would have charged at these humans under Pound's command. But now, he could suppress the impulse and avoid being controlled by Pound. But in order not to attract attention, Li Xiumon still mixed in with the low-level skeletons, cackling as he charged at the humans. He mingled among the skeletons for no other reason than to finish off targets. If the humans seriously wounded the skeletons here, Li Xiumon would rush up without hesitation and stealthily finish them off, killing the skeletons. And when the skeletons here seriously wounded humans and were about to kill them, he would charge up fearlessly, shove them aside, and ruthlessly deliver the finishing blow. In short, it was all about finishing off targets. At the same time, he fought his way toward the edge of the battlefield. Watching the constantly jumping experience points on the panel, Li Xiumon was almost grinning from ear to ear. Damn, this other world was being far too generous to an outsider. Li Xiumon still had not shown his true strength, lying low and waiting for an opportunity. So far, the battlefield had not yet presented that chance worth exposing his true strength to seize. Among everyone, if you can't be the strongest one, then be the one who hides the deepest. On this battlefield, whether ally or enemy, there were countless people stronger than Li Xiumon. As the humans kept pressing the attack, the skeletons suffered heavy losses. By this time, the succubi had already flown to the mouth of the canyon and launched attacks at the mages there. The mages had no choice but to resist. and therefore were unable to cast magical attacks on the skeleton army. Seizing the opportunity, the skeleton army began to countercharge by relying on its numerical advantage. At the same time, high-level skeleton mages joined the battle and cast undead magic. One by one, the corpses of dead humans stood back up and counterattacked the humans. The priests hidden among the humans stepped forward and began chanting in unison. Holy Goddess of Light, may your merciful radiance shine upon the earth and purify every inch of filth within your divine kingdom. First-tier magic, group purification. The chanting blended together, and golden light illuminated the entire battlefield. Clearly, the other side had come thoroughly prepared for this expedition. Wherever the golden holy light shone, the corpses that had stood back up let out sizzling sounds, gave off white smoke, and fell down once more. Even the skeletons became listless one by one. Li Xiaoman also felt a wave of irritation and weakness, but with a shake of his head, he completely dispelled the feeling. However, seeing how the low-level skeletons around him all looked listless, he put on an act as well. Lie low, he muttered. This time, the humans' momentum surged, and they charged over brandishing their weapons. The skeletons' advantage in numbers and the humans' advantage in momentum canceled each other out, and the battlefield once again fell into a deadlock. Li Xiaoman didn't care about the battlefield at all. He was still pretending to be sick while finishing off targets and edging toward the battlefield's perimeter. Lie low, he was still muttering. The bones sleeping underground are humming softly, and in the darkness the most fragrant calamity is brewing. First-tier magic, cry of bones. A familiar voice rang out. It was Lucia's voice. At this moment, she was leading a group of succubi in chanting. A purplish-red magic circle spread open beneath her feet, sending out ripples that swept across all the skeletons on the battlefield. The flames in the skeletons' chests and eye sockets seemed to be stimulated, suddenly burning fiercely. Their aura surged. The skeletons all rushed forward with clattering shrieks, excited beyond measure. The advantage tilted back toward the skeletons, and the humans began to retreat. Li Xiaoman also felt a wave of feverish heat in the soul fire within his body, as if he couldn't wait to pounce on a human and tear at them with his teeth, letting fresh blood soak his bones. It scared him so much that he hurriedly used a water spell to douse his soul fire before calming down. Damn it, lie low. Li Xiaoman continued edging toward the battlefield's perimeter. Because his colleague's condition seemed a bit off, he only delivered finishing blows to humans as he moved along. Otherwise, these stubborn-minded kin might notice something was wrong and kill him, this traitor. Damn it, being rebellious to the core, there was nothing he could do about it. The Lord's Seraph walks the earth, spreading his mercy. Tier 1 magic, Seraph's blessing. The priests chanting rang out together once more, merging into one. In an instant, the humans' weapons were all coated in a layer of holy light. And cutting skeletons was fucking like a hot knife through butter, making Li Xiaoman's scalp tingle. Will this ever end? They just keep stacking buffs without stopping. Li Xiaoman only felt that the edge of the battlefield was unbearably far away. He even wanted to just burst out and charge over directly. He really couldn't stand this bunch of buffed-up monsters. Stay calm, lie low. Up to this point, Li Xiaoman had not drawn anyone's attention. As long as he could reach the edge of the battlefield and lie low, looking for an opportunity across the whole battlefield, there would come a time to escape the clutches of evil. He had already gained over 2,000 experience points just from landing finishing blows. And after sneaking through this battle, once he evolved and changed class, he might even jump several levels at once. That was probably the only thing comforting Li Xiaoman. But if he couldn't escape Pan's clutches, then no matter how high his level was, it would all be useless, just the fate of working for nothing. Li Xiaoman strengthened his resolve to escape Pan's clutches. Skeleton, stop right there. A human suddenly sprang out and lunged at Li Xiaoman. With nimble footwork, Li Xiaoman quickly gathered several skeletons to surround the human. Before the human understood what was happening, he was hit by a righteous group beating and a finishing blow, becoming part of the evil skeleton's experience points. Almost there. Li Xiaoman had already seen the edge of the battlefield. Beyond that lay noble freedom. There was the sea, sailing ships, and a vast new continent stretching to the horizon. Adventure in another world, with cute elves and beast-eared girls waiting for him over there. No, the moment he thought of elves and beast-eared girls, he felt even more miserable. He stretched out his hand. He was about to embrace freedom. Boom. A loud crash kicked up a huge cloud of smoke. It was Pond crashing down from the sky. Li Xiaoman's body was directly blasted away by the gust, landing in the center of the battlefield. Freedom, Splat, gone. In that instant, Li Xiumon's hatred toward Pond, that missionary, and the warrior in heavy purple armor reached its peak. Pond's impact instantly blew away a large number of skeletons and humans, creating a vacuum zone in the middle of the battlefield. The warrior in heavy purple armor swung down his greatsword viciously. The sword light drew a mesmerizing silver curtain through the air. Just as Pond was about to dodge, accompanied by the sound of chanting, a gigantic golden spear fell from the sky, passing through the gap in the bones of Pond's chest cavity and pinning it to the ground. Then, the greatsword chopped down toward Pound's head. Roar! Pound let out a furious roar, the flames in its chest cavity and eye sockets burning fiercely. It raised its head, and ghostly blue fire spewed from its mouth. The warrior in purple heavy armor had to twist his body aside. The greatsword veered off, missing Pound's head and striking one of its horns instead. Crack! There came an ear-grating sound of scraping, and a section of horn was violently severed and sent flying. The warrior in purple heavy armor was also shoved aside as Pound seized the chance. It beat its wings fiercely, the flames in its chest erupting with a burst, and the golden spear was shattered. Freed from restraint, Pound spread its wings and flew into the sky. Blue dragon breath poured down across the battlefield, sparing neither friend nor foe. The succubi hurriedly spread their wings to dodge, but the skeletons suffered for it, especially Li Xiumon. Right now, he just wanted to curse out every guy in this world who could understand him. This was probably the legendary world weariness. But at this moment, Pound was enraged and had lost all reason, unleashing slaughter indiscriminately on friend and foe alike. The preacher and the warrior in purple heavy armor had no choice but to resist the furious Pound, who was attacking without regard for anything. The high-level allies and enemies all stayed clear of the enraged Pound. No one cared about these low-rank skeletons being used as cannon fodder. The opportunity had come. Li Xiumon's eyes lit up, his gaze sweeping across the entire battlefield, excitement almost overflowing from his eye sockets. It's finally here, it's finally here. Blending in among the skeletons, Li Xiumon charged in the direction opposite from Pound. Tiptoe activated. He bent down, reducing his presence to almost nothing. He kept running wildly. The scenery on both sides sped backward, and soon Li Xiumon reached the edge of the battlefield. Several humans also noticed a low-rank skeleton whose only thought seemed to be escaping the battlefield, and they moved to surround him. They were very careless. They hadn't even raised their weapons. After all, it was only a low-rank skeleton. Li Xiumon's eyes swiftly swept over those humans. 2 LV-11, 1 LV-12, and 2 LV-13. 2 mages, 2 heavily armored warriors, and 1 swordsman. In other words, squishies, tanks, and melee DPS. Why was a low-rank skeleton charging this way? How strange. One of the tanks spoke. Hurry up and finish it off. That bone dragon over there has gone mad. Damn it. We never should have taken this commission. The swordsman spoke, casually holding up his sword, aiming it absent-mindedly at Li Xiumon. No one thought Li Xiumon was a threat until he bared his fangs. Believe it or not, for a skeleton, bearing fangs takes only an instant. His ribs instantly turned into a bone sword. With one hand raised, a mud pellet formed from dirt and water shot out. Magic? What the hell? The swordsman was clearly stunned and hurriedly raised his sword to block. But Li Xiumon was very fast. The mud pellet instantly struck the eyes of the swordsman and the 2 tanks. In an instant, they lost their vision, and the swordsman and the 2 tanks were obviously dumbfounded. But they really were experienced. The tanks groped their way forward and activated a skill, forming a barrier. The swordsman immediately retreated, fumbling as he tried to hide inside the tank's barrier and clear his eyes. How could Li Xiumon give them the chance? He stomped 1 foot onto the ground, and the earth beneath the tanks and swordsman instantly turned into a swamp, making the 2 heavily armored warriors sway. And with their lack of sight and unstable footing, a huge gap appeared in the barrier. Seizing the chance, he leaped up and hurled the bone sword, trailing a blue tail flame, straight at the swordsman's throat. A precise hit. The swordsman clutched at his neck, but all he could feel was scalding blood. Ding! Killed human swordsman LV-13. EXP plus 250 fireball. Pitfall. The 2 mages also reacted and hurriedly cast their spells. The ground suddenly caved in, and a fireball came crashing down head-on. But Li Xiumon had been on guard against these 2 mages the whole time. Following the collapse, he lowered his body and climbed down, dodging the fireball. Seeing this, the mage hurriedly detonated the fireball. But by then, Li Xiumon's body was already covered in a layer of water curtain. Even though the fireball's explosive damage passed through the water curtain, it posed no threat at all to Li Xiaomon, who had 12 points in a physique with elemental resistance. Swiftness activated. He hunched his body and, ignoring the furious roars of the two tanks, charged toward the two squishy mages. With no time to cast magic, one of the mages hurriedly stepped up, swinging a blunt magic staff to block Li Xiaomon, while the other mage hid in the rear and chanted. The mages here were not completely incapable in close combat. His long staff whistled through the air as he aimed for Li Xiaomon's vital spots. Li Xiaomon only wanted to end the battle quickly. He raised his right arm, and the arm bone rapidly wriggled and grew, forming a long, narrow shield to meet the staff strike. With a bang, the long staff was knocked aside, while only a few fragments and powder fell from the bone shield. For the skeleton as a whole, it could only be considered a minor injury. What kind of ability was this? What kind of defense was this? This was a skeleton bullying someone with weak resistance. The mage's head was full of question marks. Li Xiaomon only wanted to shout, 12 points in physique, kid. The claw on his other hand suddenly grew, and with one grab, it tore through the mage's throat and windpipe. Blood gushed out, staining the skeleton red. The other mage had already finished chanting by then. Tier 1 magic, sprite fire arrow. Flames traced through the air, condensing into a lifelike arrow. With a loud crack, it shot toward Li Xiaomon. Fast, it was simply too fast. Li Xiaomon only saw a red line. He raised his right arm, and a small hole was instantly pierced through the bone shield. Then, unstoppable, the fire arrow passed by, grazing his skull. Seeing this, a look of despair appeared on the mage's face. Get lost. The two heavy warriors had finally broken free from the swamp, regained their vision, and charged at Li Xiaomon. But Li Xiaomon was not about to give them a chance. He stepped forward and grabbed the mage by the neck. Giant strength activated, and he easily crushed the neck. Blood flowed along his snow-white bones, and within the hollow skeleton, ghostly blue flames burned. This was a skeleton. He snapped off another rib and grew it into a bone sword. Without hesitation, he charged toward the two tanks. Up to this point in the battle, less than half a minute had passed, and of the 5-man squad, only the two tanks remained. From the moment the skeleton appeared until now, everything had happened far too quickly. It was as if they had only blinked once, and all their teammates were dead. This was the price of underestimating the enemy, but they no longer had the chance to learn that lesson. The two tanks could only watch as the skeleton's terrifying face kept growing larger before them. Under the alternating barrage of various spells, the two tanks soon felt a chill at their necks and completely lost their lives. Ding! Killed heavy armored warrior LV-12. EXP plus 200. With the last tank dealt with, Li Xiaomon pulled the sword from the swordsman's neck, restoring it to the form of a rib and reconnecting it to his ribcage. Then, he stripped off the swordsman's leather light armor and cloak, put them on himself, and plunged headfirst into the forest ahead, sprinting wildly. Freedom, freedom. Li Xiaomon's ghastly pale hand bones gripped the bone sword. Using his facial bones, he greedily took in the air of the forest. Even without a sense of smell, he seemed almost able to catch the earthy fragrance in the air. He kept running, running. Swift was pushed to its limit, and it seemed that the increase in constitution points had also given his stamina a decent boost. Though he didn't know whether what a skeleton possessed could really be called stamina, or should it be called bone strength. As he ran, Li Xiaomon discovered a pit in the woods. It was like a meteor crater, and the turned-up soil looked quite fresh. And right in the very center of the pit lay a huge white rock. The rock looked somewhat familiar. Wait, how was this a rock? This was Pound's enormous horn that had been chopped off by that purple heavy-armored warrior. He needed to get away from here quickly. Who knew whether that guy Pound had some hobby of collecting baby teeth and might come running over to take this broken horn back? Wait a second, this horn. Could he install it on himself? Pound's horn was far sturdier than the limbs of these low-tier skeletons. Looking at the horn before him, Li Xiaomon couldn't help thinking that. It's just that whether in terms of system compatibility or size, this horn probably couldn't be considered a proper fit for him. But what if? Even attaching just a little bit would be a profit. The more Li Xiaomon thought about it, the more feasible it seemed. If he could install this, how exciting would that be? Having made up his mind, Li Xiaomon didn't hesitate and quickly walked up to the horn, pressing his skull against it. Bone alteration, activate. The skull and the horn fused together little by little, growing into one. Ding! Obtain skill. Wind magic LV1. Obtain skill. Bone hyperplasia LV1. Obtain skill. Bone wings LV1. Obtain new evolution path. Low tier half dragon skeleton. Low-tier half-dragon skeleton. After a half-dragon dies, it transforms into a special skeleton that possesses the power of dragons, a born warrior, able to use a very small portion of dragon magic. Level cap LV30, Wind Magic LV1, Fire Magic LV1, Earth Magic LV1, Water Magic LV1 integrated into Elemental Magic LV1. He obtained 3 skills at once, and also a new evolution path. But once connected like this, he couldn't take it away. This horn was several times bigger than he was. As for cutting off a piece, that was even more impossible. The hardness of this thing came from a bone dragon above LV70, so there was no way he could cut through it himself. He had to think of another method. A flash of inspiration crossed Li Xiumon's mind. If his head evolved while connected to this thing, would this count as part of his body, and would it evolve together with him? The more he thought about it, the more workable it seemed. Could he actually be the legendary genius? With his head attached to the horn, Li Xiumon began searching the panel for the evolution section. Damn it, he collected a few too many evolution paths, and it really made the choice difficult. He actually quite wanted to evolve into an elemental skeleton, fully compatible with magic of all attributes, able to use elemental magic without chanting. Since skeletons couldn't learn faith magic anyway, they could only learn elemental magic and undead magic. An elemental skeleton was simply the skeleton of his dreams. Mastered Wine Magic LV1. Obtain new evolution path. Low-tier sky skeleton. Low-tier sky skeleton. A skeleton that wanders the skies, mastering the mysteries of the heavens and the power of wind. A dangerous assailant from the sky. Among the evolution paths, low-tier flame skeleton, low-tier ocean skeleton, low-tier earth skeleton, and low-tier sky skeleton are merged into low-tier elemental skeleton. Low-tier elemental skeleton. A skeleton that has mastered 4 elements, possessing adaptation to all 4 elements, and able to use elemental magic without chanting. A dangerous magic skeleton. Level cap LV20 on the panel. Lines of small text kept jumping, having been doing so since just now, and only then did Li Xiumon notice it. Can it really evolve into an elemental skeleton? It's just that the level cap isn't very high. Whatever, with the noble ability of chantless casting. So what if the level cap is low? No longer hesitating, he chose the elemental skeleton evolution. In an instant, 4 colored flames rose from his soul fire and swept across his entire skeleton. It was as if colors were blooming deep within his bones. The gaps at the joints connecting his limbs and body also completely fused together, and the slight differences in size and color among them were gradually assimilated and merged into pure white. And that large lump on his head connected to Pound's horn was also continuously shrinking, looking unbelievably counterintuitive. Only after it had completely swallowed the entire horn did the light and flames on Li Xiumon's body slowly subside. On the panel, the gray profession column finally lit up. As an elemental skeleton, Li Xiumon naturally chose elemental mage as his profession. Otherwise, wouldn't it be a waste? He decisively chose elemental mage. Elemental mage. Each time the level increases, in addition to extra free attribute points, spirit +1, physique +1. The moment he chose a profession, all the data on the panel began jumping rapidly, and both his level and experience bar changed at high speed, with the accumulated experience rapidly pushing his level upward. Name: Li Xiumon. Pound. Race: low-tier elemental skeleton. Level: LV13/LV20. The level cap for a low-tier elemental skeleton is LV20. Profession: elemental mage. Strength: 11/30, physique 15/30, spirit 13/30, free attribute points. 3. Evolution requirements. Race evolution can be achieved after strength, physique, and spirit are maxed out. Skills: bone alteration LV2, appraisal LV2, elemental magic LV2, elemental resistance LV1, swiftness LV1, stealthy steps LV1, great strength LV1, swordsmanship LV1, bone wings LV1, bone proliferation LV1. Status: bone deterioration. Experience: 200/2500. Description: a dangerous and cunning skeleton, versatile, skilled at disguise and elemental magic. Underestimating him will cost you your life, and never believe a single thing about this skeleton. This panel's description seems to update according to his actions. At this moment, his bones had already become like white jade in texture, smooth like exquisite porcelain. The soul fire in his eye sockets and chest cavity had also turned a sapphire-like color, flickering slightly. Li Xiumon had no time to lose himself in his newfound power. He climbed out of the large pit smashed out by the horn in front of him and continued sprinting away from the battlefield. While running, he put all his remaining attribute points into Spirit, raising Spirit to 16. After all, Spirit determined the power of magic. Li Xiaomon had not run far before a group of succubi blocked the way ahead, all of them low-tier demons. By visual estimate, there were more than a dozen. Damn it! This group of succubi must have seen Pound fly into a rage and slipped away from the battlefield to hide here. Li Xiaomon forced himself to calm down, controlling his bones to grow and restore the rough, withered yellow appearance of his original low-tier skeleton form. At this time, the succubi also got a clear look at Li Xiaomon in the darkness and let down their guard. Not a human, just a low-tier skeleton. One of the succubi spoke. How did a low-tier skeleton end up here? Another slightly taller succubus frowned. How could a skeleton disobey Pangda's orders and leave the battlefield? Li Xiaomon put on a vacant look, passed through the group of succubi, and wandered toward the depths of the forest. Fireball! But in the next moment, without any warning, a fireball smashed toward Li Xiaomon. That group of succubi had made their move. He couldn't keep pretending anymore. Li Xiaomon swiftly turned sideways, narrowly dodging the fireball. Those few succubi had only attacked as a precaution, never expecting this low-tier skeleton to be able to dodge it.